I've described how it makes a great deal of sense to start out by designing tabletop games, even if your ultimate goal is to design video games. But in this video, I want to warn you that old traditional tabletop games are a poor guide to what a good game can be. Traditional games like Monopoly and Game of Life and Risk and so on sell well because everyone knows how to play. A lot of them are bought as gifts, and there's an attraction in buying a gift where you assume that everybody knows how to play, so that if you're a parent, you don't have to worry about figuring it out for the person you're giving the gift to. The traditional games of this sort, traditional commercial games, are usually weak designs that just happen to be there first. Contemporary, or if you wish, modern hobby board games use different techniques to match contemporary tastes. They're not like these mass market traditional commercial games. For example, there's no player elimination in most contemporary hobby games, whereas in Monopoly and Risk, players are eliminated. Well, once you get eliminated, what do? You just watch? That's not so much fun. So modern games usually keep players in the game until the end. So we're going to talk about some traditional games. Monopoly, roll and move, where you roll the dice and move, is random. It gives players no choice, no control. It's a terrible technique, and you can almost always spot a poor tabletop game as soon as you see that it uses roll and move as one of its mechanisms. Monopoly also takes a long time to get going. Even though the clear strategy is to buy everything you land on, you go around the board several times as people buy up properties. It'd make a whole lot more sense if you dealt out a bunch of properties to start with, or if you auctioned a bunch of properties to start with, and then get on with the game. Monopoly has player elimination, and that's not fun. There's lots more reasons not to like Monopoly. It's a long game for what happens. It's just a poor design. Risk is not so bad, but it's still a combination of kludges, things that have been put in to solve something else, but it all turns out to be somewhat awkward. It has the problem that there can be a lot of downtime. That is, most players sit and watch while one player does things, or two players do things, roll a bunch of dice. It has player elimination. It has very much the luck of the dice. Once you've played a two-player game of Risk and rolled 1/6 the entire game, I speak from personal experience, you know that it doesn't matter what else you do, you're going to lose that game. Risk can be a very long game. The cards and turning in the cards to get large number of armies are a kludge to stop it from going on forever. There's the mass problem, that it doesn't matter whether you've got 40 armies against 2 or 4 armies against 2, the odds in the dice rolls are exactly the same. Whereas in the real world, if you got 40 armies against 2, it's a steamroll. Chess obviously is a fabulous classic game, but it has problems. It's a puzzle. It can be solved, and of course chess playing computers can now beat the best chess playing humans. It is very much susceptible to what's called analysis paralysis. That is, it's so complicated to consider all the possibilities that people just sort of freeze up and don't do anything. And that's why we have chess clocks. Chess without chess clocks is a terrible game. How many other games do you know where you have to put in a clock so that people won't take too long playing? Not very many. Chess is also vastly overstudied because there's no variety in the setup. The great American chess master and world champion Bobby Fischer, who was a known eccentric, nonetheless advocated a variant of chess where you scramble the pieces in the back row and make the setup identical for both players. And then there's lots and lots of different possibilities, and people can't rely on books and things that have been studied for centuries. They have to rely on their own thinking. But it's not become popular. Now let's take a couple other games, Candyland and Chutes and Ladders. They are entirely random. And that's okay for little children, and the children finally get a little older and they figure out that they have no control over what happens, and then usually they stop playing. On the other hand, there's a very popular party game called LRC, or LCR, left, center, right, left, right, center, different versions of the name. You roll dice, and it's entirely random. But it's become popular with adults. I suspect often with adults who've had something to drink, even though it's an entirely random game. My general advice is only use randomness in games when it fits the situation. And of course, a great deal in life is random, so often it fits the situation. But don't overdo it. Games that are entirely random are only attractive to children and drunks. Tic-tac-toe is an example of a game that's a puzzle that's very easy to solve. It's always a draw when played perfectly. Now, if you've played tic-tac-toe, or noughts and crosses as it's called in the United Kingdom, and you didn't realize that it was always a draw, then you've got some big problems to work on to be a game designer. Because that should have been obvious. Now, you can get around that by relying on other people to notice these things, but it's much better if you can notice them yourself. And by the way, if you want to try a much more interesting tic-tac-toe style game, do 4x4 squares, and you need to get 4 in a line or 4 in a square. I suspect that's also solvable, but with a lot more effort. The game of life is an absolutely horrible game. Maybe it's tolerable as a game for small children, but it's mostly random and teaches values many may not agree with. A terrible game from the point of view of adults. Even as a family game, it just doesn't recommend it much. There are much, much better family games nowadays, family hobby games. Checkers is another solvable game. It's a puzzle. And there's a computer program that has more or less solved it by brute force. It keeps track of all the possible positions of pieces, all the possible combinations in checkers, and knows what the move is that is most likely to lead to a win from that position. A man named Marion Tinsley was a world champion for a very long time and came close to solving checkers. He only lost 7 games in like decades. Battleship is a very simple game that existed as a paper and graph paper and pencil game decades before Milton Bradley came out with their plastic version. It is a mostly random game, a guessing game. But there is an example of, if not Yomi, which is reading the opponent's mind, perhaps it's an example of predictability. A friend of mine played with his sons, and his sons, he discovered, would never occupy the outer row of squares with their ships. So my friend only had 64 squares to shoot at instead of 100, and of course that meant he would tend to win most games. The East Asian game of Go is theoretically solvable, but it has far more possibilities than chess. And handicapping can be extremely important in the game because there can be such a vast difference in the skill levels of the players. It is a unique game. There are very few unique games. Even chess and checkers have various versions. There's Japanese chess and Chinese chess and so on. But Go is unique. Now there are traditional games that have some good features. For example, the traditional commercial game Careers lets you set your victory conditions, and they're hidden from other players. That's quite a good mechanism. Scrabble's word patterns have been used over and over again. Poker is very much a psychological game. Go is an amazing game. Chess's Tactical Maneuver is quite amazing, and so on. So I'm not saying they're all bad, it's just that you can't use those games as examples of really good games. So, modern hobby board games, both war games and non-war games, are often much better models of how to design games than these classic and traditional commercial games. So get to know some of the hobby games. Carcassonne, Settlers of Catan, Power Grid, Diplomacy, the war game. There are lots of good games, and if you go to someplace like Board Game Geek, you can find out about a lot of them.